Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great seriousness that we gather today to discuss a matter of profound importance: the influence of unseen forces, demons, on the lives of individuals, particularly how these forces can exert control over women through men. This subject, though rarely spoken about in the public domain, is one that demands attention because of the spiritual realities that govern every facet of our lives. It is not just a matter of physical control, but of spiritual influence, which transcends the visible and reaches into the very heart and soul of human beings. In this world, there is much more at play than what our eyes can see. The battle we face is not just a physical one, but a spiritual one. And it is essential for us to understand how these forces operate. The influence of demons, particularly in the context of relationships, is an issue that has plagued humanity for centuries. Through men, demons have managed to manipulate, control, and destabilize the lives of women in ways that are both subtle and overt. These forces do not come merely to disrupt or disturb, they seek to destroy. They seek to dismantle the divine order that was originally established for man and woman and to replace it with confusion, chaos, and conflict. But make no mistake, this is a spiritual battle that requires us to discern not just the external forces, but also the internal battles that rage within. Understanding how demons operate through men to control women is vital, not just for women themselves, but for men who must take responsibility for their actions, their roles in relationships, and the way they interact with those who are meant to be their partners. It is through the misunderstanding of divine order, the perversion of authority, and the failure to recognize spiritual warfare that many relationships fall prey to demonic influence. In these moments of distortion, the balance of power is shifted, and the rightful place of women in society, in the home, and in relationships is undermined. It is imperative that we as individuals and as a collective body recognize these forces and take decisive action to combat them. In this discussion, we will explore 8 key points that shed light on how demons use men as instruments of control over women. These are not mere philosophical musings or speculative thoughts. These are practical, spiritual truths that have been observed throughout history and are relevant to us today. By the end of this discourse, we will have a deeper understanding of the spiritual dynamics that exist in relationships and the necessary steps we must take to protect and empower women, both spiritually and practically. The spiritual battle, understanding the war between light and darkness. Before we can understand how demons control women through men, it is essential to grasp the broader context of spiritual warfare. We are living in a world that operates under spiritual laws, whether we acknowledge them or not. There is a battle between the forces of good and evil, light and darkness, that manifests in every area of life. The spiritual realm is not some abstract, distant reality. It is a very present force that affects our relationships, our decisions, and the outcomes of our lives. The Bible clearly outlines the existence of spiritual warfare. In the book of Ephesians, we are told that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. This means that the conflicts we experience in our relationships, the struggles in our marriages, the abuse of power, and the manipulation we see in society are not merely human issues, they are spiritual issues. And like any battle, understanding the enemy is crucial to winning the war. Demons are not just abstract concepts. They are active agents of evil who seek to control, manipulate, and destroy. They understand human nature. They understand relationships, and they know how to exploit weaknesses. One of the primary ways demons gain control is through the misuse of authority and the distortion of roles. Men, as the heads of their homes, are in positions of spiritual influence. When they misuse that authority, they open the door for demonic forces to enter and control the relationship. When a man fails to honor his role as a leader in his home, not as a dictator, but as a servant leader, he creates an environment ripe for spiritual attack. Demons thrive in environments of confusion, control, and manipulation. They capitalize on the absence of clarity and the failure of men to take up their rightful place as spiritual leaders. As men step out of line with God's design, demons move in and begin to control the dynamics of the relationship. This is where women, who are meant to be nurturers and supporters, can find themselves under spiritual oppression. The reality of spiritual warfare means that women are often caught in the crossfire. They're not just dealing with emotional or psychological manipulation, they're fighting a spiritual battle. The strength of women is often in their ability to be empathetic, to support, and to serve. However, when demons manipulate men, they can create environments where these very strengths are weaponized against women. Spiritual warfare, therefore, must be understood in terms of the relationship dynamics at play. And this understanding forms the foundation for combating demonic control. Misuse of authority, the perverting of God's design for relationships. In the divine order established by God, men and women are meant to function in complementary roles. Men are called to lead their households in a way that honors God, while women are called to be supporters, helpers, and nurturers. This divine design is one of partnership, where both individuals serve one another and together they accomplish the mission God has set before them. However, when this authority structure is misused, it opens the door for demonic control. One of the primary ways demons control women through men is by perverting this God-given authority. Instead of leading with love, wisdom, and humility, men may take on a tyrannical, domineering role. They may seek to control rather than to serve, to dominate rather than to guide. In doing so, they distort the natural order of the relationship, placing themselves in a position of spiritual darkness. Demons thrive in environments where authority is misused, where love is absent, and where men fail to honor their role as protectors and providers. This misuse of authority doesn't just create discord in a relationship, it creates an opening for demonic forces to work. When men abdicate their responsibility as spiritual leaders, or when they distort their role as heads of the household, demons step in to take control. They manipulate the situation, creating confusion, fear, and resentment. Women who were meant to be nurturers and supporters find themselves trapped in a cycle of spiritual oppression and emotional turmoil. The perversion of authority is one of the most subtle and destructive forms of control that demons use in relationships. They don't necessarily come in as overt threats. Instead, they operate in the subtlety of manipulation. A man may not be physically abusive, but if he manipulates, controls, or withholds affection, he is participating in a spiritual oppression that opens the door for demonic influence. The demon does not need to possess. It merely needs to influence and distort the relationship. In this distorted dynamic, women find themselves in a position of confusion, not knowing whether they are being loved or controlled, protected or oppressed. This confusion makes it difficult for them to discern the truth and to stand firm in their spiritual authority. They may become emotionally drained, spiritually depleted, and disconnected from their own purpose. In this environment, demonic forces can easily manipulate and control, keeping both men and women bound in unhealthy relationships. The restoration of proper authority within relationships is crucial to breaking the chains of demonic control. Men must step into their roles as spiritual leaders, understanding that leadership is not about domination, but about service and sacrifice. Women, in turn, must recognize their strength and their worth, standing firm in their identity as equal partners in the relationship. When this divine order is restored, the forces of darkness lose their foothold, and the relationship becomes a reflection of God's love and purpose. The emotional and psychological manipulation of women. While spiritual forces are at play in the misuse of authority, demons also work through more subtle forms of manipulation, especially emotional and psychological manipulation. These forms of control are often difficult to detect because they operate beneath the surface. In these cases, women are made to feel inadequate, unworthy, or powerless. One of the key ways demons work through men to control women is by distorting the emotional dynamics in the relationship. A man may manipulate a woman's emotions by making her feel as though her thoughts, feelings, or desires are insignificant. He may belittle her or disregard her opinions, causing her to question her own worth and value. Over time, this emotional abuse takes its toll, leaving the woman feeling spiritually and emotionally drained. The demon behind such manipulation often works through the insecurity of the man. When a man feels insecure in his own identity or lacks a true understanding of his spiritual role, he may seek to control others to make himself feel more powerful. In relationships, this often manifests as the emotional manipulation of the woman, whose role becomes one of servitude to the man's desires, needs, or emotional fluctuations. The woman may feel as though she is constantly walking on eggshells, trying to please her partner and avoid conflict. In this environment, the woman is constantly on edge, trying to navigate a relationship where her emotional needs are unmet, her spiritual well-being is compromised, and her identity is diminished. This is the perfect breeding ground for demonic control. The woman's mind becomes clouded with self-doubt, and she begins to question her own worth. The demonic forces at work feed off of this confusion and insecurity, further binding the woman in a cycle of emotional and psychological oppression. This manipulation is not always overt. It can often take the form of passive-aggressive behavior, silent treatment, or subtle undermining of the woman's confidence. Demons work through these forms of manipulation to ensure that the woman remains spiritually weak and emotionally dependent on the man. Over time, she may come to believe that she is incapable of standing on her own, further enabling the demonic forces at work. Breaking free from this emotional manipulation requires both spiritual and practical intervention. Women must reclaim their identity in Christ, understanding their worth and their place in the divine order. They must recognize the signs of emotional manipulation and take steps to establish healthy boundaries. Men must also take responsibility for their actions, understanding that true leadership in a relationship is rooted in love, respect, and selflessness. Only when these principles are restored can the woman break free from the emotional chains that demons have used to control her. The demonic use of lust and sexual manipulation. Another powerful tool that demons use to control women through men is the manipulation of lust and sexual power. Lust, when it becomes distorted, can have devastating effects on relationships, especially for women who are often more emotionally and spiritually connected to their sexual experiences. Demons thrive in environments where lust is allowed to reign, where sexual manipulation and exploitation become the norm, where lust represents a source of power and manipulation, where this demon offers inspire. Sexual manipulation does not always involve overt abuse. It can be subtle and insidious. Men may use sex as a means of control, withholding affection, or using it to manipulate the woman into compliance. This manipulation often makes the woman feel as though her worth is tied to her sexual appeal or ability to please the man. The demonic forces behind this manipulation seek to dehumanize the woman, reducing her to an object of desire rather than recognizing her inherent dignity and worth. And she will lose some solace in her soul once a sexual manipulation. This form of demonic control not only distorts the sexual relationship between man and woman, but also erodes the spiritual and emotional foundation of the partnership. When lust is at the forefront, it obscures the true purpose of sexuality, which is to create a sacred bond between husband and wife, rooted in love, trust, and mutual respect. Instead, sexual manipulation fosters an environment of control where the woman's emotions and self-worth are tied to her ability to satisfy the desires of the man. The demonic use of lust and sexual manipulation often leaves women feeling trapped and isolated. They may feel as though they have no power to change their circumstances, as their value becomes based on their physicality rather than their character. This creates a cycle of spiritual oppression where women feel disconnected from their true identity and role in the relationship. They may feel as though they are constantly striving to meet unrealistic expectations, never fully experiencing the love and support that they deserve. Overcoming this form of manipulation requires a deep spiritual awakening. Women must recognize their worth beyond physical appearance or sexual prowess. Men, too, must learn to respect the sanctity of sexuality and view their wives through the lens of love and honor rather than lust. When both partners restore the divine order in their sexual relationship, they create an environment where both can thrive spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Breaking free from the demonic control of lust requires both individual and collective effort. The woman must recognize her intrinsic worth and seek healing from any emotional scars. The man must also learn to love selflessly and honor his wife, understanding that true intimacy is about connection, not control. Only by restoring the sanctity of sexuality can couples break free from the chains of demonic manipulation. The destruction of identity, the spiritual attack on women's purpose. One of the most devastating ways that demons control women through men is by attacking the very essence of their identity and purpose. When women are denied their true worth or are manipulated into believing that they are nothing more than accessories or subordinates, they lose sight of their divine calling and purpose. Demons thrive in environments where a woman's identity is confused or distorted, as this confusion leads to spiritual vulnerability. The attack on a woman's identity is one of the most insidious forms of spiritual warfare. Demons work through men, especially those who are spiritually weak or disconnected from their true purpose, to undermine the woman's sense of self. They convince her that her worth is tied to her relationship with the man or her ability to please him, rather than her inherent value as a daughter of God. This destruction of identity leads to emotional and spiritual enslavement. When women lose sight of their identity, they begin to operate out of fear, insecurity, and confusion. They may struggle to assert themselves, afraid of being rejected or unloved. They may put aside their dreams, ambitions, and goals in favor of maintaining the relationship. The demonic forces at play use these vulnerabilities to ensure that the woman remains in a cycle of dependence, unable to step into her true purpose and calling. The restoration of identity is critical to breaking the chains of demonic control. Women must come to a place of spiritual healing and self-awareness, recognizing their worth and purpose. They must seek God's guidance and allow His truth to redefine their identity, rather than relying on the perceptions or opinions of others. By doing so, they can regain their sense of purpose and spiritual strength. Men must also learn to honor the identities of the women in their lives. Rather than using women to fulfill their own desires or to elevate their own status, they must see them as partners with unique gifts, talents, and callings. When both parties recognize and honor each other's identity, they create an environment where demonic forces can no longer have influence. The influence of cultural norms and societal expectations. While demons operate in the spiritual realm, they also capitalize on the cultural norms and societal expectations that govern our behaviors. Many of the ways in which demons manipulate men and women are rooted in deeply ingrained societal norms that place women in subservient or secondary roles. These norms create a fertile ground for spiritual manipulation, as women are often conditioned to believe that they are inferior or less valuable. In many cultures, women are expected to conform to certain behaviors, roles, and expectations. These expectations often include submission to male authority and a focus on domestic roles rather than personal empowerment. While these societal structures may seem innocent, they are often used as tools of control by demonic forces. By reinforcing these norms, society perpetuates the idea that women are less capable, less important, or less worthy of leadership roles. Demons capitalize on these cultural norms by embedding them within the hearts and minds of men and women alike. They reinforce the idea that women must be subjugated or controlled, often through the actions of men who buy into these societal expectations. The influence of these norms is subtle, but its impact is far-reaching, as it stifles the spiritual, emotional, and professional potential of women. In order to break free from this form of demonic control, both men and women must be willing to challenge and dismantle the cultural norms that seek to limit women. Women must rise above the limitations imposed by society, recognizing their God-given worth and purpose. Men must take responsibility for their actions, understanding that true strength comes not from dominating women, but from empowering them to fulfill their potential. When we collectively reject the cultural norms that seek to limit women, we create a society where both men and women can thrive. This transformation is essential for breaking the hold that demonic forces have on relationships and for restoring God's original purpose for man and woman. The role of prayer and spiritual warfare. Understanding that demons control women through men requires us to take action in the spiritual realm. We cannot simply sit back and wait for things to change. We must actively engage in spiritual warfare. Through prayer, fasting, and other spiritual practices, we can confront and dismantle the forces that seek to control and destroy. Prayer is one of the most powerful tools we have in this spiritual battle. It is through prayer that we can connect with God, gain insight into the spiritual dynamics at play, and ask for His intervention. In the context of relationships, prayer becomes a means of breaking free from spiritual oppression, restoring divine order, and healing the wounds caused by demonic manipulation. In addition to prayer, fasting and other forms of spiritual discipline can help to break the chains of control. These practices allow individuals to align themselves with God's will and remove the obstacles that prevent them from walking in their full potential. Through these acts of obedience and faith, both men and women can overcome the spiritual forces that have held them captive. It is important to note that spiritual warfare is not just an individual endeavor, it is a collective one. Communities must come together in prayer and support to combat the spiritual forces that are at work in relationships. When men and women stand together in unity, acknowledging their roles and responsibilities, they can create an environment where demonic forces no longer have the authority to manipulate and control. Through prayer and spiritual warfare, women can reclaim their spiritual and emotional freedom. Men too can find healing and restoration, stepping into their roles as true leaders, protectors, and servants. The power of spiritual warfare is not just in the prayers we pray, but in the actions we take to restore God's order and purpose in our relationships, empowering women to stand in their authority. The final key to overcoming demonic control is empowering women to stand in their God-given authority. Women are not meant to be passive recipients of male authority or spiritual oppression. They are meant to be active participants in the divine plan, fully aware of their value and their authority in Christ. Empowering women means helping them to understand their worth, their calling, and their authority. It means giving them the tools they need to recognize spiritual attacks, to resist manipulation, and to stand firm in their identity. Women who are empowered know that they are not subservient to men, but are co-laborers in God's kingdom, called to fulfill a specific purpose and to lead in their own right. Men must also play a role in empowering women. Rather than seeking to dominate or control, they should support women in stepping into their full potential. This means providing opportunities for growth, recognizing their contributions, and treating them as equals in every sense of the word. When men and women work together in unity and mutual respect, they create an environment where spiritual manipulation has no place. The empowerment of women is not just about restoring balance in relationships. It is about restoring the image of God in all people. Women, like men, are created in God's image, and when they stand in their authority, they reflect His glory. Empowering women to take their rightful place in society, in the home, and in the church is a key part of dismantling the demonic forces that seek to control and oppress. The transformation that comes from empowering women is not just personal, it is societal. When women are empowered to stand in their authority, they become leaders, change makers, and trailblazers. They lead their families, their communities, and their nations into spiritual renewal and transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, the forces at work in our world are real, and they affect every area of our lives. The manipulation and control of women through men is not just a matter of interpersonal relationships. It is a matter of spiritual warfare. By understanding the dynamics of spiritual oppression, the misuse of authority, emotional manipulation, and the power of prayer and spiritual warfare, we can begin to dismantle the forces that seek to destroy and disempower women. Empowering women to stand in their full authority, reclaiming their identity, and restoring God's divine order is key to breaking free from the chains of demonic influence. The battle is not just for women. It is for the restoration of God's purpose in every relationship, every community, and every nation. When we stand together in spiritual unity, we will see victory over the forces that seek to divide and destroy.